stop being okay with the struggle. You don't have to operate in the red. You don't have to be just barely breaking even. Find a partner that can truly help you. Make sure it's a very well documented process. You understand what success looks like. When should it be successful? So timing matters. You need to have that laid out too. But it's about finding that partner that wants you to succeed and is going to partner with you in helping you succeed. It's really easy. The hard part is finding the partner. But once you find the partner that is really sincerely, out of goodness, wants to help you, and they have a framework on doing it, and they're going to document what it looks like, I guarantee you're going to be successful.
Whether you're a small business or just a business looking to grow, what's it going to take take the next steps in order to make your business even more successful? Your bookkeeper may be sufficient enough in order to do the books, but in order to take it to that next level, you may have to add a CFO. Whether it's adding a fractional CFO or adding a full-time CFO, each of them have their benefits. In this episode, we talked to Shane Galvin of Power CFO. This is a two-part series, and in this first episode, we're going to go over his business, but also his profit pyramid, which sets him apart from the industry. His model has had proven results across different industries. Hope you enjoy this episode, and this is the Cashflow Chronicles Open Forum.
Hey, Shane, thanks so much for joining us here on the Cashflow Chronicles Open Forum. I appreciate you for connecting with us. I want to give a brief foundation how we connected. I believe Bill Kirchbaum got us in touch. So big shout out to Bill for both podcast support and his network to help folks like you connect to folks like us. So overall, you had mentioned that you have a bit of a profitability pyramid that you've been working on for staffing companies. You mind walking through that a little bit, where this came from?
So Power CFO provides what I consider strategic fractional CFO services. And what I mean by that is our focus is on anything that we're doing is what is the R. Often you find there's a lot of good fractional CFOs out there, but they are a little bit more tactical. And nothing wrong with that. But we like to focus on how to help you grow your business. For us, it's all about cash. Cash is king. So that's why we're always looking for how we can partner with other, what we consider strategic partners, to be able to provide that value for our clients. We use a lot with our staffing clients, but more than half our clients are in construction, manufacturing, you name it, different verticals. So it's the profitability pyramid. It can be utilized in a variety of different verticals. And the focus of the profitability pyramid, and this is something I've learned a long time ago, many years ago when I worked in enterprise for much larger corporations, and that is the small and mid-sized companies, often they're flying blind. And they're often overwhelmed with information. And I personally believe a lot of really amazing business owners are visual learners. So instead of having a lot of talking coming at them from lots of different angles, different accounting firms, they say things a little bit different. You might even have strategic business coaches saying things a little bit different as well. I wanted to put together an amazing visual that I would say it's a way of taking a business owner through the journey of what's going to make their business financially healthy. And so there's 7 layers to the pyramid, and you have to do level 1 first before you get to 2 before you go to 3. So they all feed off each other. But the whole focus is, if you do the profitability pyramid, we've seen on average companies getting 3 to 5% additional profit margin to the bottom line. And so the whole reason in doing that is, again, there's just so much confusion. I can't tell you how many times we have a business owner that say, yeah, I get timely, accurate monthly financials. What do you do with them? Well, I use it as a paperweight, because they really don't know what to do with the data. Or worse, they come back and say, I don't need it. I know the health of my business. Then you turn around and they're flying blind. And you say, well, how do you manage your cash? Well, I look at my bank account. Well, what would it mean to you if you had a 13-week cash projection? And they're sitting there going, I don't know. That would be amazing. It would take a lot of stress off me. I could plan better. Then I peel back and say, how relevant is that 13-week cash projection if you're not securing all of the cash that you can get to the bottom line so you can utilize it? So if you have margin drain all over the place, you're going to have less cash to manage. It's just very natural. You're bleeding out in other places. So the profitability pyramid, for example, Matt and Brad, level 1, it's all about, do you have timely and accurate monthly financials? Do you know the story behind those financials? Do you understand when you look at compare yourself to industry? How are you doing against others in your market? And at level 1 also, that's the 13-week cash projection. So it all feeds together. After you get that, then you gravitate up to level 2, level 3, level 4, all the way up to level 7.
So just going off of that, one of the biggest things that I noticed in previous conversations with you, you're saying that staffing firms usually leave a lot of margin points on the table. I think we talked about that from a brief standpoint. What does that actually look like in real dollars? And why do so few owners see that in real time?
I would say this, staffing owners, and I don't think it's overly unique just to staffing, but we're talking about staffing here. They're amazing in the front of the house. When it comes to sales and marketing, they're out there hustling. You probably won't see more hustle in your life than when you go to staffing owners. They are living and breathing sales and marketing every day. That's where they're Superman. Their kryptonite is the back office because it's out of sight, out of mind. They think that they know how healthy they are, but they don't. And I was just sharing this with Brad a little while ago. How many of us have friends when they start getting in their 40s and 50s, they still refuse to go to the doctor annually to get their annual blood draw. They don't get their blood pressure checked. They say, I'm healthy. Look at me. Staffing owners are really just like that. They look how healthy we are. We're doing well. They don't realize that just as blood pressure, they say, doctor will tell you that's the silent killer. Blood pressure kills more people because they don't know their blood pressure. It's the same thing with when you look at margins. You really don't know your margin. You don't know if you're healthy or are you slowly dying. And that is where it's a perception. They perceive that everything is going well. They got a good handle. But then when you walk them through the profitability pyramid, and we just did this about 2 weeks ago with a new client. And I said, it's very clear that you're leaving 3 to 5% on the table right now. And he said, I disagree with you. He goes, I really thought we were really healthy. I think it's double that. So often, again, we've always heard this, once perceptions, once reality. They perceive that everything is that they got a good handle on it. The reality is they don't. Until you know your numbers and you have something to measure and you're actively measuring, you don't really know how healthy you are. It's almost like if you're trying to cut some extra pounds right before a beach season, right? Don't you get on a scale? Don't you turn around and measure your waist? I mean, there's ways of measuring to see how you're tracking instead of just looking and perceiving that you're doing well and you're not. And we see that all the time with business owners. I mean, I would probably say when you look at small business owners, 30% of business owners, they don't use their financials at all. They say, this is just for the tax people at the end of the year. They manage everything off their bank account. And that's pretty much it.
So Shane, let me ask you,
I would say, Brad,
let me ask you a question. So you talk about small businesses
And when you get in, you're seeing a variety of sophisticated customers and non-sophisticated customers, right? I got a customer, I can only get annual statements out. If I ask them to do an interim statement, that can be very difficult. It takes weeks, months to figure out. We only get annual tax returns. Oh, this is really tough for me to get these quarterlies, right? So
Yeah.
what advice or what options do you have for an entrepreneur that may not be as financially savvy and just understand the lingo, but how do you help them financially get their management and financials in order? I guess is a good question for you. What's your approach?
I would say, yeah, first and foremost, let experts do what experts do. Okay. Often having your sister's best friend's cousin be your bookkeeper because she has some extra time probably isn't the best solution. And I'm not knocking people. Listen, when you start a business, you do what you have to do. You're just trying to survive. So I totally get it. There is a point in time where you have to say, again, let experts do what experts do. You need to get a real true bookkeeper in there, one that knows what they're doing. And instead of spending maybe $15 an hour, maybe spend 25. Upgrade your talent, whoever's doing your bookkeeping, ensuring that you get timely, accurate monthly financials. After that, the next step is find a partner that can, I don't want to put a plug in for us, but even like Power CFO, we have packages where we'll work with the client 1 to 2 hours a week. So you don't have to have the ability to hire a full-time person anymore. You can get an amazing, talented individual, a partner that can come in, that can put this stuff in layman's terms for you instead of talking over your head. And again, that's why we came up with the profitability pyramid, because so many business owners, Brad, when you have a CPA or a CFO type talk to them, it's over their head. They're sitting there going, I'm checked out. You lost me in the first couple sentences. I don't even know what you're talking about here. So you need to find a partner that can take the data, take the process, and make it to where it makes sense for you. But it is all about good quality data, and that's where getting the right bookkeeper in there. There again, we have lots of clients, Brad, that they come to us and say, we're ready for someone like Power CFO. And we say, okay, the first thing we do, Brad, is we look at your last 3 years of tax returns, just so we get a good taste of your business and then your internal financial reporting. More than 50% of the time, we identify major tax issues, typically overpaying in taxes. And so we just had a client out of Texas where we identified that they paid over $1 million in federal taxes over a 3-year time because their bookkeeper, unfortunately, when they were reconciling their bank account, wasn't reconciling over to AR. They were double hitting and going over and booking the revenue. So the revenue was booked once, and when they were doing the reconciliation, they booked the revenue again. Therefore, revenue was overstated. At the end of the year, they paid double tax. And
So,
they sent this
Shane, let me ask
information
you, is that common? Sorry, is that common for when you guys get engaged that you're seeing these adjustments, I'll say? Because I just had a customer that they had a bookkeeper, almost the exact same example. They had a bookkeeper. They weren't entirely great, and that's not their fault, right? They're only going to do to the best of their abilities. And the company's growing. They're trying to go to the next step. We offered an option for a fractional CFO. He interviewed people, and he said it was the best thing he ever did because now his financials are better. It frees him up, and now he has, I'll just say, another person or leadership with him as the CEO of his company, because as we all know, being a CEO is a kind of real lonely at the top. Now he has an actual partner.
Yeah. It happens all the time. Brad, I would say over 50, easily, maybe over 60% of the time, when we go on and do an engagement, we find major discrepancies on their tax returns. and it typically they overpaid, and it compounds. You get what you pay for. And again, I'm not knocking the mindset of a small business owner. I've been there. You know, when I started, at Power CFO, it was nothing for me to say, hey, does anyone have a NDA I can borrow? Right? I mean, you try to cut corners any way that you can, as long as it's legal, right? So I understand that you have to do what you have to do to cut the corners. But when you look at your bookkeeper, if your bookkeeper makes, unfortunately, a mistake, and then your tax people, they don't catch it because, again, you get what you pay for. If you're going with someone a little bit more local, they're we all know it during tax time, they're crushed. I can't tell you how many times we had business owners say, you know what, I'm really disappointed. I send my tax return over to my tax or my tax information over to my tax preparer, and they don't ask me questions. And I'm like, that's because they're overwhelmed. They're trying to get 1,000 companies' tax returns done in March, right? They're swamped. They don't have time to slow down. And I want to say this too. I have lots of CPAs that are friends. CPAs are more tactical. Typically, they're more tactical. They're not always very, they're not strategic. They're not looking forward typically. Okay. So they're not looking there, Brad, and saying, wow, I noticed that your revenue significantly increased this year over last year. What caused that? Your margin is double. This doesn't make sense. They're not slowing down to ask those kind of questions. So they prepare a tax return based off the data that they have, and it's incorrect. And it's because a bookkeeper missed it. The tax preparer was overwhelmed. They were under deadlines. They were under a crunch. They kicked the tax return out based off the data that they had. And so Power CFO comes in, and we look and say, no, you've overpaid. Now, the client loves us for it. But I'm sitting there going, just imagine how many of these small businesses, they don't have someone like us look at their financials and determine, is there a major discrepancy here? And believe me, I could be missing the mark here. I've never heard a time the federal government has reached out to a small business and said, hey, we think you overpaid. We're going to write you a big check.
Yeah, and they're
I've
not going
never
to give you
seen
the interest, right?
No, no, not at all. So when we start talking, about cash flow and stuff, it's not just about, do you have a 13-week cash projection? How do you measure it? Do you track it? Do you update it every week? It's all the components that go into that cash flow through everyday business that's going to make the impact.
So that's a perfect segue into the level 2 of your profitability pyramid. So why does Monday morning cash matter so much to staffing firms compared to any other business, in your opinion?
Well, there's two things that will kill a staffing firm: AR and work comp. So and what I mean by AR is it is all about cash. If you're not collecting and getting cash into your account, you're going to have some major problems. Okay. Now, the Monday morning, what we call that flash report, it's not just about cash flow. This is about, and let me back up just a little bit, then we'll jump back into level 2. In addition, in level 1, it's all about, do you even have a business plan? And I always have individuals say, I don't, but it's in here. Well, no, you don't really have a business plan then. Okay. I'm just being fair. I've been there. Okay. So when I preach this stuff, I'm sitting there going, well, I used to be like this too. Why do I have to have it documented? Because if you don't document it, you can't measure it. So let's go through a business plan very quickly at the high level. Okay. Your business plan, it should have, over a course of the 4 quarters, what are you really trying to measure? What are those KPIs? If you don't know what they are, you need to talk to someone like us. If not Power CFO, there's amazing fractional CFOs out there. Okay. Get with a fractional CFO that can come in, help you quickly put a business plan together, identify your KPIs, understand what success is by quarter. Now, Matt, let's go forward to the level 2, your flash report. I always tell individuals, if you're waiting until 10 to 15 days after month close to understand your financial position, you're operating at a major disadvantage when it comes to your competition. The quicker you can identify challenges and correct those challenges, the more healthy your business is going to be. So when you look at that weekly flash report, you're not just measuring cash flow. You are measuring cash flow, but you're also looking at the rest of those KPIs. What is the health of your business this week? And what's the story? Again, you know how many times, Matt, I have a business owner that happens to know their financials, and I say, well, tell me the story. And they're like, that's the problem. I see numbers. I don't know what this means. I don't understand the story. So that weekly flash report, not only should you be measuring your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and to ensure that you're delivering against your plan, your business plan that you put together in level 1, but you want to know what is the story so you can make the adjustment then and there versus waiting another 6 to 8 weeks to do that.
I think that's super important. I think that's a continual theme within the whole Cashflow Chronicles piece. It's proactive versus reactive. So how do you build stability and structure within your overall financials to make sure you can act before it's too late? Because realistically, everyone we've had on, they're like, plan ahead, just all hypothetical scenarios. I guess one question to build off of that, you mentioned AR, and clearly I work in the AR space. We talked about that with trade credit insurance, which is super vital for staffing. What's the number one risk beyond AR that most owners overlook, in your opinion?
I would say the number one challenge is they don't know their margins. And typically it peels back to pricing. We can agree to disagree. I've heard many times from salespeople, the problem is you're not selling enough. You need to invest in sales. If you're at 10 million, your life can be better. Get to 15, get to 20 million. I can tell you firsthand in that we have well over 60 clients. That strategy typically doesn't work. You can't always sell yourself out of margin issues. I'm going to give you an example. A couple years back, we had an amazing client. He's like a brother to me now, out of Pennsylvania. Smaller business, 5 million in sales. 5 million sales. He lost $500,000 that year. We came in, did a deep dive, a SWOT analysis, pretty much on steroids. We identified the top 10 areas that we need to focus on to shore up margin leak. The next year, gentlemen, he went down to $3.5 million in sales. He lost 1.5 million sales, but he was $100,000 profit. So explain how you can go for 5 million in sales at $500,000 in loss to 3.5 million sales at 100,000 profit. He was focused so many years, Matt, on trying to sell himself out. Hey, I'm going to sell myself out of this problem. It didn't matter. He could have been at 50 million in sales. He's still not going to be profitable because he wasn't changing his behavior when it came to protecting his margin.
You know, this is a shout out to other fractional CFOs in that industry altogether. If you haven't looked into that, it's so helpful to have an objective third party to come in there. I know a friend of mine, she mentioned like we cut out like a low margin client in their overall pop. It's the same theme. Their profitability increased dramatically just by cutting a high concentration client at like a 7% margin.
Yeah.
Yes, you can say here locally, I have a great relationship with GM or Ford and they're great, but your margin's so low. But what if you cut that out and just increase your margin appropriately? So it pays dividends. And I think it's helpful to have somebody like you that can objectively analyze that.
And let's even take another step further. In this situation, not only did we find opportunities to improve margin in certain areas of when we're looking at his financials, I identified that he was more than double paying his payroll provider. His payroll provider was overcharging him accidentally for 2.5 years. So not only
You
did we
just
identify the issue,
found some cash flow for him, right?
that's correct. We were able to turn around and come back and say to his payroll provider and say, we're looking at the contract here. This isn't correct. And we were able to get back over $100,000 in cash. So it's one of those things where there's certain, when you look at your margins, remember it's financial fitness. Okay. We just found out that he was supposed to be eating a clean diet, but his dietitian was giving him horrible food, right? That's what happens when a payroll provider's double charging you. As soon as you cut out and get back to that clean diet, meaning now you're paying what you should have for your payroll and you're getting money back, all of a sudden now you're healthy.
I like that analogy you mentioned regarding diet. It ties into the blood pressure scenario you brought into play too. So you distinguish between symptoms and root causes. What's the most common symptoms that owners chase that leads them down the wrong path? Would you say it's predominantly margin, that's a lack of financial tracking?
I'll say this. I think the number one, so you're right. In level 3, the profitability pyramid, is the focus is identifying the true problem versus symptoms. I personally believe the main problem is the business owner. I believe they're typically the single point of failure, and not always. And I'm not trying to be critical. They're doing the best they can, but how many times do you see a business owner chasing the latest trend, the shiny toy? And I'm talking about technology. I can't tell you how many times they are trying to resolve a problem by bringing in new technology, which is going to cost them quite a bit of money, just to find out that new technology is going to resolve the symptom, but not the problem. And oh, by the way, because they don't have the right process and procedure in play, the new technology that they just spent a lot of money on, they're going to utilize it at 20% of its efficiency. So they're not even getting max value out of it. And then typically down the road, about 6 months in, they shelve the project and say, it sucks. The product's no good. It's we don't want to use it. In 6 months, when the contract's up, we're getting rid of it. When the issue is a couple things. One, they're trying to resolve a problem and it was nothing more than a symptom. And then when you look at the profitability pyramid, the issue is level 4 is how do you implement the solution? They don't even know how to implement this, in this case, the technology in a manner where they're getting maximum usage out of that product.
So just to build off of that within level 3, you have so many client relationships are critical with AR, and obviously you've had a long-term customer. It's like, hey, I love them. We're super tight. You might mention GM and Ford as an example here in Michigan. What are scenarios you come across where there's resistance to either change relationships due to margin, where it's like, hey, I know them well, there's a potential long-term effect? Do you have any scenarios where there's been like potential resistance to making that change?
I would say there's a couple different ways to look at this. The first is, and I don't disagree with this, if they are, I would say they're buying their client. And in this regard, they're giving this client an amazing margin because they see a future with that client where they can go and really grow that relationship. Go from, when it comes to staffing, instead of having 5 headcount in there a week, they're hoping to get 50, 20. So they're willing to take short-term pain for long-term gain. They're trying to buy the client. I get it. You can do that to a degree, but you can't do that with half your business, right? So you got to be strategic with it. So now let's come over to the other end. I think typically what we find, and I've been there early on when I started Power CFO nearly 5 years ago. You're always kind of fearful of losing a client, right? So how are you going to go talk to them about increasing pricing when you're approaching it from a fear standpoint? You're not going to be very successful because it's written all over your face that, hey, Matt, I need to increase your rate by 15% because I got to pay my team because, labor costs are going up. I got to pay them. Well, I know Matt's very well turn around and say, nope, I'm going to go use a different provider. So you don't want to have that conversation. So what I would say is, are you looking at other ways to make up for that margin? It's not always going back to the client, but you can go back to the client. Show them your value. I mean, if you look up the stats out there, people don't typically terminate a relationship based off price. That's not the number one reason people will typically terminate price if they are not getting the perceived value. And number two, it's about the relationship. So we tell the clients, are you focused on ensuring, don't assume that they understand the value you're providing. Sometimes without being over the top, you need make sure you're communicating the value that you're providing them so they're aware of it. And then you want to turn around and secondly is ensure that you do have that working relationship with them. People often think that sales ends as soon as a contract is signed. Sales continues all the way through. You want to make sure that that is a healthy relationship. So that is the guidance that I give our clients. Now, if they are not doing those two things, it is risky going up and trying to ask for increased pricing if your client doesn't understand the value, and two, you don't have a relationship.
I think that's a really good point because it's a competitive marketplace, but what value do you deliver? I know we had previous staffing professionals on here, and how do you distinguish what makes you different outside of price? Listen, if you always want to shop based on price, there's someone there, but
Yeah.
clearly I deliver the talent to you and things like that. So I will wrap this up. This is our first session. There's a lot to discuss within the profitability pyramid. Look forward for episode 2 to come here soon.